The morning light filters through broken windows of what was once the heart of American automotive ambition. Assembly Building 84 stands 6 stories tall on South Lafayette Boulevard in South Bend, Indiana, its 800,000 square feet of reinforced concrete echoing with the ghosts of workers who once built some of the fastest cars in America. The machines are silent now. The assembly lines have long since disappeared. But this building holds a secret that most Americans have forgotten. Before Detroit's Big Three dominated American racing, there was a small company from Indiana that built wagons for pioneers, and then, against all odds, created vehicles that could outrun anything on 4 wheels. This is the story of Studebaker, a company that survived the transition from horse-drawn carriages to gasoline engines, that built vehicles for Abraham Lincoln, and supplied wagons for the Union Army during the Civil War, and that ultimately proved you didn't need to be the biggest to be the fastest. It's a story written in oil stains on factory floors, in the roar of supercharged engines, and in the determination of engineers who refused to accept that small meant slow. In 1852, 2 brothers arrived in South Bend with $68 and a dream. Henry Studebaker was 26. His brother Clement was 21. They opened a blacksmith shop at the corner of Michigan Street and Jefferson Boulevard, working by firelight, hammering metal into wagon parts for the settlers heading west. The gold rush was on. California beckoned, and every family that pointed their compass toward the Pacific needed a wagon that could survive 2,000 miles of prairie, mountain, and desert. The Studebaker brothers understood something fundamental about manufacturing that would serve them for over a century. Quality wasn't expensive. It was profitable. A wagon that broke down in Wyoming meant a family stranded, vulnerable, desperate. A Studebaker wagon, built with aged timber and reinforced axles, meant survival. Word spread along the wagon trails. By the time the Civil War began, Studebaker wasn't just a blacksmith shop. It was a factory. When the Union Army needed wagons, they came to South Bend. The Studebaker brothers developed a special process to age timber quickly, allowing them to fulfill massive military contracts without sacrificing quality. By the war's end, Studebaker wagons had carried supplies to Sherman's army on its march through Georgia, had transported the wounded from battlefields, had become synonymous with reliability under the worst possible conditions. In 1889, when Benjamin Harrison became President of the United States, he ordered his carriages from Studebaker, not from a company in Washington or New York or Boston. From South Bend, Indiana, by the turn of the century, Studebaker was producing 75,000 vehicles a year, employing thousands of workers in a factory complex that covered acres of land along the St. Joseph River. 20 massive steam boilers powered 16 dynamos. 16 large motors drove 600 machines for working wood and iron. 11 miles of drive belts connected it all. 500 lamps illuminated the factory floor at night. It was by any measure an industrial cathedral, a monument to American manufacturing prowess. But the world was changing. In 1900, there were only 8,000 automobiles in the entire United States. By 1920, that number had exploded to 8 million. The age of the horse was ending. Studebaker faced a choice: adapt or die. They chose to adapt. In 1902, Studebaker sold its first electric automobile. In 1904, they unveiled their first gasoline-powered car. The transition wasn't easy. Some in the company argued they should stick with what they knew, that automobiles were a passing fad, that Americans would always need wagons. But the brothers who had bet everything on westward expansion now bet on mechanical horsepower. The factory that had built carriages for presidents began building automobiles for a nation in motion. The 1920s brought both triumph and tragedy. In 1923, architect Albert Kahn designed Assembly Building 84, a massive structure built with reinforced concrete instead of wood, with enormous windows that flooded the factory floor with natural light. It was the most advanced automotive manufacturing facility in Indiana, perhaps in the entire Midwest. Workers poured into South Bend from across America and Europe. Polish immigrants, Italian stoneworkers, African Americans fleeing the Jim Crow South, all drawn by the promise of factory wages and steady work. South Bend's population exploded from 36,000 in 1900 to over 100,000 by the 1930s, but success brought complacency. By the 1950s, Studebaker faced a crisis. General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler had grown into giants, using their massive scale to drive down prices and drive up production. Studebaker couldn't compete on volume. They couldn't match Detroit's advertising budgets. They couldn't afford to retool their factories every year with the latest styling changes. What they could do, however, was build fast cars. Really fast cars. In 1951, a man named Frank Mundy took a Studebaker to NASCAR tracks and started winning races. The car wasn't supposed to win. Studebaker didn't have the biggest engines. They didn't have the most horsepower on paper. But they had something Detroit overlooked: engineers who understood that speed wasn't just about power. It was about weight distribution, aerodynamics, reliability. A car that could run at top speed for 500 miles without the engine seizing or the transmission failing was worth more than raw horsepower that couldn't last 50 laps. Throughout the early 1950s, Studebaker quietly built a reputation on American racetracks. While the automotive press focused on Hudson Hornets and Oldsmobile Rocket 88s, Studebaker mechanics in South Bend were developing vehicles that could compete with anything on the circuit. They weren't building race cars from scratch. They were taking production vehicles, the same cars that families bought from dealerships, and proving they could survive the punishment of oval tracks in endurance racing. The breakthrough came with the Carrera Panamericana, Mexico's brutal open road race. Over 2,000 miles of mountain switchbacks, desert straightaways, and roads that barely deserve the name, drivers pushed their vehicles to absolute limits. Studebaker entered specially modified Champions and Commanders, cars that had been stripped down, reinforced, tuned for endurance. They didn't always win, but they finished, consistently, reliably. While more powerful cars broke down or crashed, Studebaker vehicles kept running. Back in South Bend, the racing department operated quietly in corners of the massive factory complex. These weren't official factory teams. Studebaker couldn't afford a racing program like the Big Three. Instead, they supported independent teams, provided technical expertise, shipped specially tuned components to drivers who believed a Studebaker could win. It was grassroots racing at its finest, mechanics and drivers forming partnerships, sharing knowledge, slowly building a network of believers who understood what the Studebaker engineers knew: you didn't need the biggest budget to build the fastest car. By 1956, Studebaker was ready to make a statement. They needed a halo car, something that would prove to America that small manufacturers could still innovate, could still compete, could still build something extraordinary. The result was the Golden Hawk, and it was unlike anything else on American roads. Raymond Loewy's design studio had created the basic shape years earlier with the Champion Starliner, a sleek coupe that looked like it was moving even when parked. For the Golden Hawk, Studebaker added a massive vertical grille, raised the hood to accommodate a larger engine, and bolted fiberglass fins to the rear quarters. But the real innovation was under that raised hood. A Packard 352 cubic inch V8 engine producing 275 horsepower, Packard and Studebaker had merged in 1954, a desperate attempt by two struggling independents to survive. The marriage was rocky from the start. Packard was dying, dragged down by years of mismanagement and mounting debt. But before the company collapsed completely, Studebaker acquired something valuable: Packard's powerful V8 engine. That engine, stuffed into the relatively light Golden Hawk chassis, created something remarkable. The power-to-weight ratio was phenomenal. The acceleration was brutal. In July 1956, Speed Age magazine lined up the Golden Hawk against the Ford Thunderbird, Chevrolet Corvette, and Chrysler 300B. The Golden Hawk demolished them all. 0 to 60 miles per hour in 7.8 seconds. Quarter-mile times that embarrassed cars costing twice as much. A top speed of 125 miles per hour. This wasn't just fast for a Studebaker. This was fast. Period. The automotive press couldn't believe it. Here was a car from a struggling independent manufacturer, built in a factory that still had equipment from the wagon building days, outperforming vehicles from companies 10 times Studebaker's size. The Golden Hawk proved what Studebaker engineers had been saying for years: innovation could beat muscle, intelligence could beat money, and a small company in Indiana could build cars that made Detroit nervous. The Golden Hawk wasn't perfect. Critics claimed the heavy Packard engine made the car nose-heavy, though racing drivers who actually drove the car hard rarely complained about handling. The real problem was price. At over $3,000, the Golden Hawk competed with cars from Chrysler and Cadillac. Most buyers who could afford that kind of money wanted the prestige of a Big Three badge, not the risk of an independent manufacturer that might not be around in 5 years. For 1957, Studebaker made changes. The Packard V8 was gone, Packard itself having finally collapsed. Studebaker's engineers replaced it with their own 289 cubic-inch V8, adding a Misi Culloch supercharger to maintain the 275 horsepower rating. The supercharged engine was actually heavier than the Packard it replaced, but it solved the supply problem. The styling changed too. The hood now had a prominent bulge to clear the supercharger. The fins became concave, sweeping out from the sides. The result was even more dramatic, even more distinctive. These were the best performing Golden Hawks Studebaker ever built. The supercharger gave them slightly better top-end speed. The modified weight distribution improved handling. But the economic headwinds were building. The recession of 1958 devastated the automotive industry. Luxury car sales collapsed. The Golden Hawk, already a niche product, saw sales drop to just 878 units. That number sealed its fate. By 1959, the Golden Hawk was gone, replaced by the more economical Silver Hawk. The experiment was over. Studebaker had proven they could build a world-class performance car. They just couldn't sell enough of them to matter. The story might have ended there, another tale of a small manufacturer overwhelmed by market forces. But Studebaker wasn't done yet. In 1961, the company hired a new president, Sherwood Egbert, who believed the only way forward was to take even bigger risks. If the Golden Hawk had made a splash, Egbert wanted to create a tidal wave. He commissioned Raymond Loewy to design something completely new, completely radical. Loewy had 40 days. The result was the Avanti. If you'd like to hear more stories like this, please subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us uncover forgotten chapters of automotive history and bring them back to life. The Avanti didn't look like anything else in 1962. No tail fins, no chrome excess, just clean lines, a fiberglass body, and aerodynamic efficiency that made it look like it had time-traveled from the future. Under the hood, Studebaker offered supercharged versions of their V8 that could push the Avanti past 170 miles per hour. In August 1962, Andy Granatelli took a modified Avanti to the Bonneville salt flats and broke 29 American speed records. The car that was supposed to save Studebaker was now the fastest production car in America. But speed doesn't pay the bills. The Avanti was expensive to build. The fiberglass bodies took longer to produce than stamped steel. Quality control was a nightmare. Customers who ordered Avantis in 1962 sometimes waited months for delivery. By the time production smoothed out, the moment had passed. The Avanti sold respectably, about 4,500 units in its first year, but it wasn't enough to stop the bleeding. Studebaker was losing money on every car it built. The factory in South Bend, that massive complex that had once employed thousands, was running at a fraction of capacity. On December 9, 1963, the South Bend Tribune broke the story. Studebaker was closing the Indiana plant. Production would move to Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, where a smaller facility would build a limited line of vehicles. 7,000 workers learned they were losing their jobs just weeks before Christmas. Some didn't believe it. Others were angry, many were simply stunned. Studebaker wasn't just an employer. It was South Bend's identity. Generations of families had worked in that factory. Fathers had brought their sons to work beside them on the assembly line. The rhythm of the factory had been the rhythm of the city for over a century. The last car rolled off the South Bend assembly line on December 20, 1963. Workers gathered to watch it pass, this final vehicle, the end of an era. Some took photographs. Others collected small pieces of the factory as souvenirs. Outside, the winter wind blew cold across the St. Joseph River. Inside, the massive building began its slow descent into silence. Production continued in Canada for 2 more years, but everyone knew it was over. On March 16, 1966, the last Studebaker rolled out of the Hamilton plant. It was a 4-door sedan, anonymous and unremarkable. No ceremony marked the occasion. No speeches were given. The company that had built wagons for pioneers, vehicles for presidents, and some of the fastest cars in America simply stopped existing. 114 years of continuous manufacturing ended not with a bang, but with silence. South Bend struggled to find its identity. The factory complex sat empty, a monument to industrial decline. Some buildings were demolished. Others were repurposed. Assembly Building 84 survived, eventually housing educational facilities and offices. But the neighborhoods that had grown around the factory hollowed out. Houses that had sheltered factory workers stood vacant. Businesses that had depended on Studebaker wages closed their doors. The population that had peaked at 132,000 in 1960 began a slow decline that wouldn't reverse for decades. Walk through South Bend today and you can still find traces of Studebaker's empire. The Studebaker National Museum preserves gleaming examples of the company's vehicles, from horse-drawn carriages to the Avanti. Tippecanoe Place. The massive mansion Clement Studebaker built in 1889 now operates as a restaurant, its 40 rooms filled with diners rather than the Studebaker family. City Cemetery holds the graves of the brothers who started it all, their monuments standing over a city they helped create. But the real legacy isn't in museums or mansions. It's in the knowledge that a small company from Indiana once proved that innovation could compete with scale, that intelligence could match muscle, that 7 engineers in a South Bend workshop could build cars that embarrassed vehicles from companies with $100 million budgets. The Golden Hawk wasn't just fast. It was a statement. Small manufacturers could still matter. Independent companies could still compete. American ingenuity wasn't limited to Detroit. The racing heritage Studebaker built in the 1950s has been largely forgotten. Few remember that Frank Mundy took Studebakers to victory in NASCAR events when the company had no official racing program. Few know about the specially modified champions and commanders that conquered the Carrera Panamericana. Few recognize that the Golden Hawk's performance numbers were achieved by a company that was already struggling financially, that was building cars in a factory designed for wagons, that was fighting for survival against competitors who had every advantage, except one, the willingness to take risks, that willingness to find Studebaker's final years. Other companies played it safe, building cars that looked like last year's model with slightly different chrome. Studebaker built the Avanti, a car so radical it still looks modern 60 years later. Other companies focused on quarterly profits. Studebaker sent Andy Granatelli to Bonneville to break speed records, knowing the publicity wouldn't save the company but doing it anyway because it mattered. Other companies accepted that small meant insignificant. Studebaker's engineers proved that small meant nimble, innovative, willing to try things the giants wouldn't dare. The workshops where those engineers worked are empty now. The concrete floors where they assembled supercharged engines for the Golden Hawk have been swept clean. The loading docks where finished cars were shipped to dealerships across America stand silent. Assembly Building 84, that 6-story monument to industrial ambition, houses classrooms and offices, the next generation learning in spaces where their grandparents once built vehicles. But on quiet mornings, when light filters through those enormous windows, you can almost hear the echo of assembly lines humming, workers calling to each other over the noise of machinery, engines firing up for the first time. You can imagine the excitement when someone brought news that a Studebaker had won a race. The pride workers felt knowing that the cars they built with their hands could outrun anything on the track. You can feel the determination that drove engineers to stuff a Packard V8 into a champion chassis just to see if it would work, the stubborn refusal to accept that Detroit knew better. The automotive world has moved on. The big three are no longer American-owned. Manufacturing has scattered across the globe. The idea of a small independent manufacturer competing with giants seems impossible now, a relic of a different time. But the Studebaker story reminds us that impossible is just a word, that innovation matters more than size, that a small workshop in Indiana once built cars that made the world pay attention, that pioneers don't always ride in covered wagons. Sometimes they drive supercharged coupes with fiberglass fins, racing down forgotten highways toward a horizon that's always moving, always just out of reach, but worth chasing anyway. The factory is silent now, but the legend remains. And somewhere in America, a Golden Hawk still sits in someone's garage, its Packard V8 waiting to roar to life, ready to prove once again that small companies with big dreams can build cars that outrun the giants. That's the real legacy of Studebaker, not the buildings or the balance sheets, but the belief that innovation beats imitation, that courage beats capital, and that a handful of engineers with oil on their hands and determination in their hearts can change what people think is possible. If you enjoyed this journey through automotive history, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. There are countless forgotten stories waiting to be told, and your support helps us bring them back to life.